WWE made headlines this week by signing AAA star Dragon Lee, with ESPN reporting that he will be starting with the company this month and working for the NXT brand. I mean, how else will he ever learn where the hard camera is? The announcement was made by Dragon Lee in the ring on Wednesday, immediately after he and his brother Dralistico won the AAA Tag Team titles from FTR at their Noche de Campeones event in Acapulco. Just as soon as they won them, they turned around and they vacated them. And if that sounds like it was a last-minute thing, it was not. This was something that was known weeks ago when Dragon Lee came to an agreement with WWE, and keeping it quiet until Wednesday's show was part of that agreement. Dave Meltzer says that Tony Khan was aware of what was happening with Dragon Lee and that Dragon Lee and Dralistico were going to be beating FTR to win the titles, and he did not ask that, Dralistico be the one to score the winning pinfall on his guy, instead of Dragon Lee getting the pin, which he did. On Twitter, Triple H called Lee an unbelievable athlete who has collected accolades and held championships across the globe, and he is just getting started. The next chapter of Dragon Lee's career begins with NXT. And WWE's head of talent, strategy, and operations, James Kimball, not to be confused with Detective John Kimball from Kindergarten Cop, said, "It's not a tumor." No, he said Dragon Lee is a tremendous talent that will immediately add value to the NXT roster. This signing is reflective of WWE's renewed emphasis on globalizing our talent pipeline, with Latin America positioned as a focal market. Meltzer says the contract is a 3-year deal for what he calls NXT money, and not main roster money, but that it is higher than the standard NXT deal, and it has pay increases built into it each year. It would make him the highest paid NXT talent now that Mandy Rose has gone from the company. He said the impetus for Lee's signing was that it was time to make a move. Given the current situation in Mexico when it comes to making money, he claims that Lee wanted to work for New Japan, and New Japan loved him, but that was not an option because of New Japan's partnership with CMLL, which is AAA's mortal enemy. And Dragon Lee used to work for CMLL with his brother Roosh. It's a big family. Lots of brothers here. So he used to work for CMLL with Roosh, who of course is currently signed to AEW. But if you remember, I covered this on the Sound Off at the time, episode 619. Roosh and Dragon Lee were both fired by CMLL in 2019. The day after Ring of Honor's Death Before Dishonor pay-per-view. They were not happy with Lee after he worked the Battle of Los Angeles for PWG, when they told him not to because there was AAA talent working the tournament as well. Oh my god! Oh no! There's AAA talent on the show. Well, they didn't want him working the show, he worked it anyway. I mean, this AAA CMLL stuff, it's like two warring mob families. I mean, it's ridiculous. WWE and AEW were both interested in signing him, but WWE was even more interested in signing him after his Dynamite appearance in August, and when they learned that he was working without a contract when he appeared on Dynamite that night, all of a sudden WWE perked up and they had a ton of interest in signing Dragon Lee. So that was the night Kenny Omega returned for the Trios tournament, and he tagged with the Young Bucks against Andrade and Roosh and Dragon Lee. And if you remember when the match was over, Andrade and Roosh, they turned on Dragon Lee. And Andrade gave him a hammerlock DDT, and Dragon Lee's mask went flying off his head. It was a very confusing finish, especially because it never led to anything. It never got followed up on, but I guess it was never followed up on because he didn't sign a contract. Triple H was not even on the job for a full month by that point. He was in the middle of a signing spree. He was bringing back old names, right, to make their return to TV. I can believe that he wanted to make a splash by signing someone like Dragon Lee. He was trying to create a buzz for the product and an excitement that was lacking under Vince McMahon. We heard similar stories about a month later about Bandito after he had that great match with Chris Jericho on Dynamite, that they took notice and they wanted to sign him, and they did make him an offer, but ultimately Bandito chose to sign with AEW. And he has wrestled a grand total of 2 matches for the company since then, both in the world title eliminator. One was a win over his brother, and then he lost to Ethan Page. We have not seen him since. And I'm hoping that that is just a matter of him wrapping up commitments elsewhere, because I know he's been wrestling in Mexico. It's not like he's been sitting at home waiting by the phone for Tony Khan to call. He's been working. Someone the other night tried to explain to me, oh, well, maybe he's part of the Ring of Honor roster, and Tony is just holding him out until they launch their weekly show. Then that must be news to the AEW web team, because if you go to their website, Bandito is very clearly listed on the AEW roster. He is not listed on the Ring of Honor roster because they have their own roster page on their own website, and he is nowhere to be found. He is an AEW guy. Doesn't mean that he can't work for the Ring of Honor brand once the weekly show launches. I mean, look, he's, a former Ring of Honor world champion. But right now he's an AEW guy, so that is not an excuse. It's very likely that had Dragon Lee signed with AEW, it would have been the same situation. A lot of fanfare initially, and then lots of frustration about where the hell is Dragon Lee. He'd be the new Miro. AEW also made an offer to him. Meltzer says that he went to friends for advice on which deal he should take, and at least one of those friends advised against AEW for fear that he would get lost in the shuffle. Just so happens that he is very good friends with Andrade. I would bet anything that Andrade is the one who gave him that advice. Which, if that's the case, if that's true, I find that very amusing, because 3 years ago, it was Andrade who advised Rush and Dragon Lee against going to WWE. And now I could easily see him advising Dragon Lee to do the opposite. Lee was also interviewed by ESPN, and he said that Finn Balor was responsible for helping him get into the company. A few months ago, Balor asked him, would you like to join WWE? And he said, yeah, sure, why not? And the Cubs fan who covers the Lucha Libre promotions and is pretty well plugged into that scene said that Lee had a couple of WWE tryouts in recent months, and it was after that second tryout that he was offered a deal. He's worked for Ring of Honor, he's worked for AAA, CMLL, New Japan, AEW, pretty much everywhere but WWE. He is well-traveled for a 27-year-old. He even worked a match for us at House of Glory 6 months ago. It was he and Dralistico against Midas Black and Jay Lyon, who are now our HOG Tag Team Champions. So I am well aware of how talented this man is. I would go so far as to say that he is the biggest luchador they could sign right now, not named Vikingo, who is the most talked about luchador in all of wrestling right now. WWE is clearly excited about the signing. They gave the news to ESPN to break, and they're already said to be producing introductory videos for him. It's encouraging to see. It's encouraging to see that. It's encouraging to hear that. The news broke while I was streaming after Dynamite, so I didn't get to read the news until later. You guys are the ones who broke the news to me live. But people were talking about this like it was this major deal. And I would caution people to curb their enthusiasm just a little bit. I think some people have unrealistic expectations for Dragon Lee. As far as exactly, he's going to be one of their big top stars. No. But this is a Triple H booked WWE now, not Vince McMahon. Times are changing, and maybe a really dynamic lucha star like Dragon Lee could be treated as big of a deal on TV as they're treating his signing so far. It's possible, but again, I would caution people to pump the brakes a little bit. We have seen these big international acquisitions come in before with all of this fanfare and then fizzle out, right? We have seen this story play out before. We saw it years ago with Mystico, who became Sin Cara, the original. He was the first name I heard about being likened to the next Rey Mysterio. This guy was incredible. WWE held a press conference for him. It was hailed as such a big signing at the time. That didn't work out too well. And one of the things that he complained about was that WWE would not allow him to work the style of match that he was doing in Mexico, which is what got him over in the first place. Right? We've seen that with people before, where they work a certain style elsewhere, and it's not just luchadors, it could be talent from anywhere, UK talent. They work a certain style, a certain fast-paced style somewhere else. They come to WWE and they force them to slow down, right? And I can understand why they would want them to do that for longevity, and it's just not the way they do things, right? You gotta slow down, right? Slow things down. But there are just some people where you're going to watch them and think, man, this is not the same guy that I saw working in these other promotions. I'm seeing it today. Shinsuke Nakamura had the match with Great Muta this morning. And I'm already seeing comments on my timeline from people. Oh, we got to get this Nakamura. What a great match. Why can't we get this Nakamura in WWE, right? We don't get to see this guy in WWE. So, again, that could be something that ends up being an issue as well. But we saw it with Mystico. We saw it with Kenta. They had a contract signing for him in the ring in Japan. None other than Hulk Hogan. They flew Hulk Hogan over to Japan to be in the ring for the contract signing for Kenta. One of the main reasons they signed him was because WWE Network was launching in Japan the following year, and they wanted this big Japanese star for it. Now, to be fair, Kenta was plagued by injuries for a lot of his run there. That's not WWE's fault. And I think he would have won the NXT Championship from Kevin Owens and not Finn Balor. Finn Balor ended up winning it from Kevin Owens, had he not gotten hurt. But we'll never know how his run would have gone. And he doesn't like talking about it. He'd rather forget that it ever happened. We saw it with Kushida, who was doomed. Once they gutted NXT and they converted it to 2.0, Kushida was doomed. We saw it with Gran Metalik. And do you know what led to Metalik being in the Cruiserweight Classic, which is what got him noticed in WWE? His friendship with Finn Balor. So I hope that things work out better for Dragon Lee than they did for the last person that Balor recommended to WWE. Because Metalik, look, he spent years there. I'm not saying that, I'm sure he made good money, and that's probably one of the reasons why he went there. But again, people had certain expectations for this guy. And I don't think you're going to find too many people who would look back on Gran Metalik's run and the Lucha House Party and all that and say, oh, they really maximized, this guy's potential. Kalisto. Kalisto is another one, although he was born in Chicago. Working under a mask, ended up winning 2 United States titles and a Cruiserweight title. He spent almost a decade working for WWE and still owns one of the craziest spots that I have ever seen with that Salida del Sol off a ladder to Jey Uso at that TLC pay-per-view. But he was someone, under a mask who went to WWE and was able to find success. So you never really know for sure how these things are going to work out. This man, Dragon Lee, is taking a chance on himself. He's going to be moving to Orlando with his family. I'm sure he'll be given a new name. They could very well take his mask away from him like they did with Andrade because they felt, oh, he's too handsome to be wearing a mask. But I think they have been actively looking for a new masked luchador, which if that's the case, there you go. You got him, right? You won't find very many better than this guy. And Dragon Lee told ESPN that signing with WWE was always the dream. He thinks that he can become the next Rey Mysterio. He just needs the opportunity. WWE's been trying to find the next Rey Mysterio for fucking 20 years now. And they have failed to do so. One of the reasons that they have failed, and something that worked in Rey's favor, is the fact that he speaks fluent English. And in WWE, it's very difficult to get over or to get opportunities to get over traditionally if you do not speak at least decent English. Your promo ability is even more important than what you can do in the ring there. It's always been that way in WWE. Whether people want to admit that or not, it's going to be a problem for him when it comes to their scripted promos. But he admits in the ESPN story that one of his goals is to work on becoming a more well-rounded performer. He said he's been working on his English. He said that it's his challenge to learn more about promos and that it's something that is new for him and he would like to learn something new. So he gets it. He's saying all the right things. It sounds like he gets it. He understands that if you go to WWE, this is what you are going to have to do. So it makes sense for him to start with NXT because this is all new territory for him, right down to how they produce television, time cues, where the cameras are. These are all things that we take for granted when we watch these shows. Everything feels so seamless, but there's going to be a steep learning curve for him. One good thing is that NXT has had a better track record than the main roster has when it comes to lucha talent. 2 recent examples are Andrade and Santos Escobar. They had great runs on the NXT brand. Andrade peaked in that company with the matches that he had with Johnny Gargano and Aleister Black. He was never the same on the main roster. With Escobar and Legado del Fantasma, the jury is still out. He hasn't been up on SmackDown for very long. For WWE, why this is a big deal. There's 2 reasons. Number one, It represents a shift with Triple H running creative. You are going to see more names like Dragon Lee, who might have otherwise signed with AEW. Seriously consider a run with WWE and talk to people, as he did with Balor, about coming in. Should they or shouldn't they? What should I do? What do you advise? And they're going to be told, you need to be here. Things are different now. You'll find more success here now than you would have before. WrestleVotes tweeted this week that WWE is hopeful of the signing of Dragon Lee being just the start of standout talent agreeing to terms with the company. And they're hearing that Triple H and his crew have expectations to land other high-quality names early in 2023. This is where the real value of this signing is for this company. Now, the other reason is, if their ultimate goal is to make inroads in the Mexican market, you know that they're looking to expand the NXT brand into other countries and open additional performance centers. They've talked about, look, we have NXT Europe launching this year at some point. Shawn Michaels has flat out said that there has been talk of NXT Japan and NXT Mexico, with those announcements coming as soon as later this year. This year! So signing someone like Dragon Lee for the NXT brand is all of a sudden very appealing to them. And it's the sort of thing that Triple H was not shy about during the Black and Gold era, when he signed lots of international talents for that brand, whether it be Asuka or Neville or Kenta or Finn Balor or Shinsuke Nakamura. They all started in NXT. So WWE has got themselves a quality talent in Dragon Lee, but it's what his signing represents in the larger sense that is going to make for a very interesting 2023 in the world of wrestling. For his sake, I hope he doesn't uproot his entire family just to spend the next 3 years toiling away at the Performance Center, making NXT money until nobody really cares anymore. But he's only 27 years old. If it doesn't work out, at least he can say that he tried, and he would still be young enough that he can go tear it up somewhere else.